welcome back to Lakeisha's Leadership Circle. I'm so excited to have you joining us for another week. Hopefully last week you completed your leadership SWOT analysis where you looked at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This week we're going to be looking at 15 characteristics that make a great leader. So make sure you print out your worksheet for this week and also bring out your worksheet from last week if you have it handy. So as we're going through this list, I want you to not only think about your own leadership style, but also think about some great leaders that you know and think about whether or not they embody some of these leadership characteristics. So let's jump right in. The first thing a leader needs to be is honest. It's important for a leader to be honest so that you can share information with your team members in a way that they don't have to question whether or not you're just saying things that sound good to them or you're trying to make them feel good about themselves, but that you're able to offer honest feedback to them about their performance, because people cannot grow if you're not being honest with them. The next thing you need to have is integrity. As a leader, your team members should never have to question whether or not you're making good decisions on their behalf. They also shouldn't have to question whether or not you're being genuine with them. Are you saying things behind their back? I once worked under a leader who was saying some very nasty things behind my back, and it made the team members uncomfortable because I'm sure even though in the moment they might not have said anything to him about it, but it made them feel uncomfortable to know that he was being two-faced in their opinion. And so that can undermine your leadership skills if you're not exhibiting integrity with your team members. Next, you have to have confidence. Your team members want to know that whatever you're leading them toward or whatever the charge is, that you have confidence that you all are moving in the right direction. If you don't believe it, it's going to be really, really hard to sell it to them. 4, you need to be inspirational. So whatever it is that you're trying to get your team members to be on board with, you need to figure out what's the best way to inspire them to do great things. So just saying, okay, because I told you so, and I think we discussed that about 2 weeks ago. We talked about positional leadership, and that's when people follow you just because you have the title of leadership. That's not what you want. You want to be able to inspire people to do more and to be more. And honestly, having honesty and integrity and your confidence, people are attracted to those characteristics. And those are some of the things that will help you to be an inspirational leader. You want to be able to talk to people in a way where they feel like at the end of that conversation, they can conquer the world. Next, you want to have a commitment to your team. You want to have a commitment to the project. If you go into a project and you're like, I don't know if this is going to work out, I'm not quite sure about what we're doing, then those same attitudes are going to transfer to your team members. So even if on the inside you're kind of not sure about what you're doing, you want to show your team that you are committed to the end. And that commitment doesn't mean that once we decide on a course, we're going to go with that course, even if it means falling off the ledge. Sometimes being committed means being committed to the result and being okay if you have to change courses. Next, you got to have passion. Whatever it is that you're working on, you need to exude some passion. And that's where that confidence comes in. If you're not passionate about it, if you don't feel like, yes, we're going to make this happen and this is the greatest thing that's ever been done, those emotions, again, they transfer to your team. As a leader, one of the things that you do is transfer your emotions, not only your skills, not only what you have to deposit into your team, but the emotions that you have. Those also transfer to your team. Next, you got to be a good communicator. So that means not having things in your head and expecting people to read your mind and expecting people to intuit whatever you're thinking. You want to be able to communicate clearly with your team members. Some people are better verbal communicators than they are written communicators, and it can be vice versa. Whatever method of communication works best for you, that's how you want to communicate with your team. But also be very careful to figure out how your team likes to receive information so that you can communicate in the best way to them. Some people are audio learners. They learn better by hearing from you. Some people are better learners through demonstration. So take the time to figure out what's the best way that your team members learn, and also what's the best way that you provide information, so that you can work to ensure that as you're transferring information, because the transfer of information is critical to the success of a team. If you have all the information and you're not transferring knowledge, you're not transferring information, you're not building leaders. So it's important to figure out what's the best way for you to communicate with them and what's the best way for them to receive information. Next, number 8, you got to be good at decision making. There's nothing worse than a leader who hates making decisions. Even if the decision is wrong, having the capacity to go back to your team and say, hey, I know we started going down the road in this direction, but based on new information, based on circumstances, we're going to take a slight detour, or we're going to change courses. Being okay with telling people when you're changing your decision, but you have to make decisions. And it's also okay to get information from your team members, to allow people to have input. This doesn't mean that you have to be a dictator. I always tell my teams, like, when we're in our meetings and we're in the process of making decisions, I want to hear all the ideas, bring all the ideas to the table. But at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision because I know what everyone's parts of the pie look like. So my decision is going to be, how do we bring all those parts of the pie together in a way that moves the team forward? So it's not just about one person or their part, but it's about making a decision that's in the best interest of the team. And when you've been honest with your team members, when you've exuded integrity and confidence and passion, and you're communicating with them, when you make that decision, they're much more likely to be on board with you. Number 9, you got to be accountable to somebody. If you're out here just freestyling and nobody's checking you, or if you're not allowing your team members to say, hey, you said the deadline was, April 13th and it's April 15th and we haven't turned anything in, and you get mad because they're trying to hold you accountable, that is not a good sign of a leader. Everyone should have someone who's holding them accountable to being who they said they're going to be and doing what they say they're going to do. So if someone comes to you and say, hey, you said you were going to do this, don't get mad. If it's a very valid issue that they're bringing to you, own it. There's nothing worse than someone who is making mistakes, or if they miss a deadline and they get upset because someone is trying to hold them accountable. That will undermine the integrity of your team. So if someone brings something to you that's their attempt at holding you accountable, be okay with that. Own it and say, okay, I wasn't able to get it done, or we changed the deadline, or whatever it is. But be accountable to being who you said you were going to be and doing what you said you were going to do. Number 10, you got to be reliable. Your team has to know that they can count on you. That just like you expect them to have your back, that you have their back. So if there's something that comes up, you don't want to be the weakest link on your team. And I know that may sound strange because you're like, hey, I'm the leader. How can I be the weak link? But there are a lot of teams where the leader is the weakest link because the team members can't rely on the leader to be honest, to be a good communicator, to be committed, to have passion for the project. So whatever you're working on, you want to make sure that your team can rely on you. Number 11, you got to know how to delegate. Leaders create leaders, and the only way that you can help other people to become great leaders is by delegating tasks to them. If you're the type of leader that thinks you have to do everything and no project can get done unless it has your hands on it, you are limiting the amount of productivity that your team can achieve. Because your hands being on everything means that there's less work that gets done by the team as a whole. So figure out, what are the things that I can delegate? And of course, you want to go back, and if it's something that you delegated for the first time, you definitely want to walk your team members through it and check to make sure that they're doing it in excellence. But don't think that you have to do everything. Which leads us to number 12, empowerment. Great leaders know how to empower others to be great. Once you've delegated a task, empower your team members to do it to the best of their ability. And sometimes they're not going to do it the way you would have done it. That's okay. We're looking at end result, which leads us to number 13 and 14, and I'm going to kind of pull these together, and that's creativity and innovation. Great leaders allow their team members to be creative, and they allow them to be innovative. So just because someone's not doing it the way you would have done it, don't be so quick to say, oh no, you can't do it that way, or that's not how we've always done it, because that is one of the surest ways to kill the spirit of your team. But as you're empowering them, encourage them to be creative, encourage them to be innovative. Nothing new has ever been established without innovation. If you're always doing it the way you've always done it, then you don't have the opportunity to improve the process or to improve whatever it is that you're working on. So if it doesn't work out, depending on your timeline and the parameters of the project, then, there may be some instances where you have to say, okay, we don't have time for innovation, or, I don't need you to be creative because we have to do it a set way. But if there's opportunity, empower your team members to be creative and to show innovation, because that's one of the ways that you all learn from each other and that you move the ball forward. And finally, a great leader has empathy. So that means that you can't be a hard-nosed all the time, nose to the grind. People have lives and things come up. Great leaders understand the humanity in their team, and they don't expect them to be robots. So you got to understand that you're working with a group of people, and as much as you want to inspire them and encourage them and for them to be creative, you also have to be willing to listen and to understand if they miss a deadline, why they missed a deadline. Don't allow people to be slackers. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But if situations come up, show some empathy, because that will go a long way with your team members if you're strategic about it. So I hope all of that made sense. And as you're looking at your worksheet, I want you to answer 3 questions this week. 1, what qualities do you think make a great leader? So we went through 15: honesty, integrity, confidence, inspirational, committed, passionate, great communicator, makes decisions, accountable, reliable, delegates, empowering, allows people to be creative and innovation, and shows empathy. Of those 15, what are most important to you in a great leader? And who are some of the people that you know that are great leaders? Ask yourself, do they embody these characteristics? And then I want you to think about, which of these characteristics do you embody? And which of these characteristics can you improve upon? Because one of the goals of the leadership circle is for you to not only be working toward creating other leaders, but for you to also do some self-assessment to figure out what are some areas that I can grow in. So as you're looking at the 15 characteristics of a great leader, I want you to think about which of those characteristics do you embody and which of those do you need to improve upon. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to hit the inbox. I definitely want to hear from you all, and I want to know how you're doing on this journey. So thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you back here next week.